name is Evananda. I've been teaching yoga around the world for over 30 years, sharing my blessings by offering free yoga classes, currently on the most beautiful beach in America, here in Siesta Key, Florida. Furthering my collaboration to raise personal and planetary consciousness, I now present Beyond the Matrix, a program in which I have thought-provoking conversations with authors, scholars, teachers, and healers who are on the cutting edge of ideas which will inspire, educate, and open our hearts to the multiple ways we can transform our world. We are welcoming back Elissa Bentsen of Forever Souls. This is our third episode with Elissa, who is a former counselor and board-certified hypnotist. She trained with psychiatrist and author Dr. Brian Weiss, a pioneer in past life regression therapy. She draws from the work of Dr. Michael Newton, psychologist and researcher in between-life regression. Ms. Bentsen is also a certified Lightworks method healer, focusing on soul trauma repair. Her website is foreversouls.com. Continuing our discussion on reincarnation, we focused last week on some very interesting reincarnational case studies. If you would like to view our two previous shows with Elissa Bentsen, you may go to the archive section of Beyond the Matrix on this site, cbnvideo.com. This week, the discussion will center around what happens in between reincarnations, or to put it another way, what happens to us after we die and before we reincarnate. So welcome back, Elissa.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming back.
Pleasure to be back.
Well, let's just get right to it. My question is, has there been any official research done on what happens to us after we die?
I think the foremost researcher is Dr. Michael Newton of the Newton Institute. He has regressed hundreds and hundreds of individuals, asking questions about how they appear in an afterlife and what process occurs once they are on the other side. Mm-hmm. What's fascinating about his work, and especially evidenced in his two most famous books, Destiny of the Soul and Journey of the Soul, mm-hmm. is that there's very little variance between what all of these individual people who do not know each other, have never met before, describe as their experiences in the afterlife.
So, how many case studies have been correlated?
Well, I would say probably at least 300 or 400.
300 or 400. Mm-hmm. And so then tell us what has been discovered about this, the experiences. What have they reported about it?
Well, I think the most interesting thing is most people, and I myself before I read these books, have the notion that you go to heaven or the afterlife or whatever you want to call it, and you sit around and watch soap operas and eat bonbons. And that's not true. There's work to be done.
It's depicted as a passive experience.
Right.
That you're done.
You're done.
You sort of...
it's playtime.
It's playtime. You
Right.
enjoy yourself for the rest of eternity.
Right. When I considered the progression of activity in the afterlife and understood how organized and detailed and defined it was, mm-hmm. it dawned on me, why would afterlife be any less organized than our planet, which is extremely organized ecologically and in all forms. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything relates to something else. Everything survives as a result of something else. Yes. I mean, our world is extremely organized, whether we're aware of it or not. It is. If one thing fell away, if air were not there, everything would collapse. If water were not there, everything would collapse. So, not that the afterlife is like that, but it is organized like that. The process seems to be that once the soul leaves the body,
Yes.
it is greeted by either a master guide, beloved relatives who have passed over, or friends who have passed over, but there's some sort of accompaniment. The soul is not alone once it reaches a certain point in the transgression from body to discarnate. After that greeting is accomplished, the next step is to look at your Akashic Records. The Akashic Records are the history of your soul's experiences. And according to Newton, you actually go into a library where your book, your records are pulled,
Yes.
set in front of you, and you look at them, only rather than seeing it as one would see reading a book with a flat page, what you're looking at is a holograph. Scenarios in which you behaved in a certain way, either appropriately or inappropriately, spiritually speaking. And then your guide, or who's ever with you, an archangel even at that time, rather than offering something that sounds like criticism or punishment, the mood is, the feeling is that the message that comes across is, here's what you did, what could you have done better? And that you really judge yourself rather than being judged by some outside influence.
I understand.
The other variation on this theme is that you go before your council of elders, and if you will, this is your governing board, who may want to address in particular some things that you've done or said, or give you advice for a future life. But most of the time, it's the look at the Akashic Records.
So what you're telling us is the evidence that was accrued from all the regressions of these, some, what you said, 400 people? So this is the agreement that they have, is that you go to the Akashic Records, right? All right, go ahead.
Then after you get a handle on what you have done inappropriately and need to work on, you kind of make a checklist with your guide or guides as to what you wish to accomplish in the next life. What are the areas of behavior that you're going to need to work on? Is it a trust issue for you? Is it a compassion issue? Is it forgiveness? There are many themes that prevail in people's repetitive lives. So the next piece is kind of like a welcoming that you receive from your soul family. Soul families are groups of souls who have interacted with you in many lifetimes, some of whom may have actually been in body in your last life. All of us have certain members of our soul family who come back with us to accomplish mutual goals, to help us deal with karma. Maybe we owe them karma, or karma is owed to us. And they're participants in that. So you have kind of like a little welcoming party. And then it's off to school. And he describes it, Newton describes it as actually like a school building where you go into a classroom and you are not alone, you are with other souls, usually soul family members, because you're all working on similar themes, and you discuss how you could better deal with a particular situation or react to something physically or emotionally that would bring your soul vibration higher. And that would be in the highest and best good for all those involved and what that particular moment in time was. It's kind of like a freeze frame, you know, where you stop and you look and you say, uh-oh, I could have dealt with that person better. I could have been kinder. I could have forgiven so-and-so for whatever they did to hurt me. I could have taken a higher road, and I didn't. So I need to do that the next time.
Okay. May I ask, so in this classroom environment, which, as you describe it, very much resembles, of course, a classroom that we've all attended, in those dimensions, are you confined to that room, or can you, or is your education does it take you outside of that room to feel or to give you experiences in a sort of a more dynamic way? Or are you confined to that room where you discuss?
I'm
Is there
not
any
sure.
evidence of that?
I don't recall Newton describing the need to go outside of that environment.
there isn't. I see.
However, once again, we have to remember the soul has free will. Could the soul get up and say, I'm not ready to learn this lesson right now, I need to think about it some more? I would imagine that
They would.
that entity could.
Yeah.
But I think those that are really there to learn and to grow would stay pretty focused on the lessons that they're working on.
So is that where your next life is being chosen?
I think it contributes to a soul's choosing what the details of their next life would be, what the elements are going to be, what the core elements are. And then the next phase after that is to actually choose a life. And here Newton describes this as if one were going to a staging area where there are pillars and columns that have screens on them that are also holographs, in which one could view, an entity can view a scenario of a life, of a next life, that would allow them to use all they've learned, to use that information, and to achieve their soul's
So they get
destiny.
a preview of their next life. Is
Like
what
a
you're saying.
preview,
Like
yeah.
a preview.
Yeah, like a movie trailer.
Right. Like a movie trailer.
Right.
All right.
And so once that task has been completed, it's like the bullet points have been accomplished. Well, this will happen and that'll happen, and I'll meet these people, and that soul family member is going to come and help me. Then the next stage is to choose one's parents. And this is a hard concept for people to get, because so many of us wanted to or want to blame our parents or the circumstances of our early childhood for everything that's ever happened to us. Well, if mom hadn't been so unloving and dad hadn't been so absent, I wouldn't have turned out this way. When in truth, we chose those parents who would behave in those specific ways because they would be teaching us something, either by modeling the ideal behavior, parental behavior, or by being the opposite. And so we would come away and say to ourselves, I don't want to be like that. So we're learning in opposition, which is another form of learning.
Yes, that's and used many times in material life.
Right.
If we looked at reincarnation, and the obvious question people would have, well, why is it that if we choose our life, why is it that we don't choose always to be rich, wealthy, intelligent, athletic, beautiful?
Well, you can choose that if you
But why
wish.
wouldn't we do it all the time? Why in the world would we choose to be anything other than that?
Because without obstacles, we don't grow. Even
That's it.
Freud said that the humankind needs an obstacle, an impediment to learn to go over, under, or around.
Yeah.
So without these challenges, we wouldn't grow as souls. And so we arrange for them to be present in our next incarnation.
And is reincarnation a mandatory process for all human beings?
Oh, no. We're at choice. The reason why most souls come back, those who are still required to, who have not perfected their behavior yet, is because they want these challenges. They know that Earth School is 10 times more difficult than learning in the afterlife.
No, yes.
And so they want to make the process go more quickly and reach the highest state of ascended master more quickly. And they can do that in body. Not necessarily on Earth, but in body.
Uh-huh. So I could see a soul who had an impatience about them, that they could choose one single life in which they had mounted tragedies, one after the other, where you would look at them and you'd say, what in the world? Why would they have these apparent coincidences, these horrible coincidences where their whole family dies, their house burns down, it's just one thing after the other, and none of which they've created themselves, but which happened to them.
Well, in a sense,
sort of an accident.
They have created it.
Yes.
They have created it themselves.
That's what I'm getting at.
And they're very ambitious souls.
And they're ambitious. That's
ambitious.
the difference, is that they have the temperament where they don't want to wait a string of souls to learn the same lessons. They want to concentrate it in one life.
Right.
And so, but it comes, there is a question I have about karma. And because karma is associated with reincarnation, as you described last time, that we're sort of burning off karma, or we're paying off karma. But in India, reincarnation, for the most part, is accepted as real. But even a concept as spiritually uplifting as reincarnation is, it can have a debilitating effect on a culture. In India, for example, the idea of karma is absolutely connected with the concept of reincarnation, but it becomes a means of oppression of an entire minority of people called the untouchables. Now, these poor people suffer terrible lives and are treated much like slaves because it is believed that anyone born as an untouchable must have done something horrendous in their past lives, and therefore they deserve what they get. That is, they deserve to be enslaved. So this has gone on for centuries, where an entire class of people have been oppressed due to the misunderstanding of karma.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wanted you to maybe just to speak to that a little bit, so that people aren't given the impression that, oh, well, I'm not going to help this person because he's probably got really bad karma and he deserves it.
It would be difficult for, I think, any metaphysical person to look at another human who is suffering and say, I'm not going to help them because it's their karma. Although there are instances when we help and we do have to back off because our helping isn't really helping. Our helping is perhaps enabling. So there's a difference. But to address the untouchables in India, my response would be, our Creator, and in nothing that I believe is there the feeling or the notion that we are meant to suffer. Our Creator wants us to live productive and relatively happy lives. Our souls want that too. And it is our constant desire to bring order to our lives so that we can have this inner peace that we seek. Mm-hmm. There's no one that I can imagine who wouldn't deserve inner peace. And I'm talking about even the worst of souls.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's Newton or some other author that I've read that talks about a soul, for instance, similar to Hitler. What good could that have? What bad karma he incurred, but is there any positive aspect of that? And yes, there actually is a positive aspect in the sense that his actions woke up the world a little late, but better late than never. And we have created this feeling of never again. Mm-hmm. We have created this awareness, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Yeah.
Which I think is now pretty much a global concept. We see it acting out in history now.
Yeah. Well, there is a definite forward movement culturally, value-wise. I think people are becoming better, even if it's in small increments. Mm-hmm. I see it. If you look over the entire cultural history, there has been a progression forward. And sometimes great evil is necessary to create a shock, a sort of an impetus towards the good. Yeah. Well, another question that a lot of my friends have been asking me to ask you, because so many people love their animals, whether they can reincarnate back with their pets. I know it sounds frivolous, But there is that concern in people. They so miss their animals when they die.
I don't think it's frivolous. I think it's a very heartfelt emotion.
Yeah.
Our pets aren't just our pets, they're our children for many of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we think of them that way and we treat them that way.
Mm-hmm.
And they have souls as well. According to Newton, definitely our souls, spirits, go to the afterlife. And we may call upon them in wherever we are in the afterlife. But they more or less congregate in another area. So that when we want them, because it's all done by thought in the afterlife,
Yeah.
telepathy, when we want them, we just mentally ask them to come, and there they are. So we can have them around us or with us as long as we wish, but as a group, they don't necessarily intermingle with all the other entities at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I had a reading once by a lovely woman in London who was a medium, a trance medium, and she described, she connected with my deceased mother, and she described a little dog that was running around my mother's feet, and I recognized this dog as one of my dogs that had passed over.
Oh.
And the message my mother was sending me was, I'm taking care of him for you.
Oh, that's very sweet. Must have made you feel
It made me, yes, right.
very at peace.
And there was no way she could have known. She described him perfectly.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Well, yes. Well, that's just
Mhm.
good news for everyone,
Right.
I'm sure.
So we are reunited, yes. And I think our pets watch over us, even our deceased pets watch over us even in our current lives.
And they reincarnate.
Yes, they reincarnate.
I've heard that pets tend to reincarnate as group consciousness and not as individual consciousness, and that only when they are associated with us do they develop an individual soul. Is that right at all?
I haven't heard that,
No.
so I can't comment one way or the other.
see.
What I have read and feel to be true to me, because you read many things, many different people's opinions, many descriptions. So you have to learn to discern as to what feels right and true to you.
Mhm.
And that's all I can address, is what
Okay.
feels true to me. Is that perhaps pets are on the evolutionary scale in so much as they are experimenting with life in a different form. They are learning to be higher level beings in a more higher intelligence form, like
Yeah.
humans. And so the pet we have today is learning to experience feelings so that it can become a body in another lifetime. Just like a
Animals-
plant has a soul, a
Everything
tree has a soul.
Everything has a soul.
And maybe that's the beginning, that's where a soul really starts to learn, is
Mhm.
on these lower evolutionary scales until they are prepared, schooled, if you will, to come into a human form.
That would make logical sense. I am a believer that there are in the animal kingdom they have a more direct and clear path to an intelligence that we're not privy to. That
It offsets.
what is called dumb instinct,
Mhm.
in fact, is just a extremely clear being a receptacle to information, data that we
Can't pick up.
can't pick up.
Right,
So that's
just like
why
we can't hear what our dogs can
that's
hear
right.
because they're
and that's
hearing.
why they can navigate and
Mhm.
find things that we could never find, and they have skills that we could never
Right.
have because they have an intelligence also that we could never aspire to.
Right. This is,
So-
I would imagine, is a compensation for the fact that they can't physically do a lot of the things that we can do. And they
Exact-
can't speak.
And they can't
biggest,
speak.
the
And
lack of
maybe-
communication.
And maybe even the fact that animals are the way they are, that is that they have a sort of an automatic intelligence, that we are allowed our experimental intelligence, that is our imaginative intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So we are allowed to live in this sort of area where things are governed around us by higher intelligence so that we can experiment with our own sense of what it is to be
That feels very right
Yeah,
to me.
I think so too. Now, I wanted just to ask you, when our reincarnational cycles are done, is there any evidence of where we go after that?
Yes, but before I answer that question, I want to complete the answer to the last question about the process, because there's one more step involved.
Oh, there is. Well, we have about 4 minutes left, so if you could be concise.
The last step is after one has picked one's parents, picked one's life script and parents, is to wait for the right planetary moment. Astrologically, so that you come in with certain natal characteristics that are going to assist you in completing your life path for that.
That makes a great deal of sense. I'm a great believer in astrology, and so that makes a lot of sense. And the precision that's necessary must be just absolutely astounding. Mathematical precision of when you are born.
There are some who believe that we come in with a certain sun sign and a moon sign, and when we come back again, it's flipped, so that our moon becomes our sun and our sun becomes our moon. And therefore, we are bouncing back and forth between two key components of our natal chart, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime.
It's interesting because the moon represents your alter ego. So it is sort of the face you don't necessarily show. So it's interesting that flips, so the in becomes the out and the out becomes the in. So it's very interesting. Well, I would like to thank you very much for coming to the show, and let's talk just a bit about what we're going to do in our last show together, because you are a soul trauma therapist. So just briefly, if you...
Soul trauma healing is different. First of all, there's no hypnosis involved.
Okay.
Second of all, it is channeled information coming from spirit to me, which I then relate to my client.
I see.
Rather than them experiencing themselves a past life in an active state, it's more passive for them. I channel the vision of the past life, and then we ask spirit to explain how it correlates to something that's going on in the now.
I see.
Then we remove the negative energy that was created in that past life trauma, whatever it was, mind, body, or spirit trauma, and call back the soul pieces that left.
Okay.
Soul pieces leave the body when there is trauma. And lifetime after lifetime, you get depleted.
I see. So that will be a very interesting conversation. I hope you all return next week when we'll be discussing with Miss Elissa Bentsen of foreversouls.com. And I'd like to end with a quote. I did not begin when I was born, nor when I was conceived. I've been growing, developing through incalculable myriads of millenniums. All my previous selves have their voices, echoes, prompts in me. Oh, incalculable times again I will be born. That's Jack London, the Star Rover. We'll see you next week. Thank you for coming.